Hi everyone, it's Kelly here. If you can hear purring in the background, I have a cat at my feet. Hopefully she's going to stop bumping into the tripod, which she has been doing for the last 2 minutes. So fingers crossed for a steady record. Okay, welcome if this is your first time. Welcome back if you have been before. So glad to have you either way. Today I am wrapping up the books that I read in the month of March. So I am going to be talking about giving my reviews of these books and generally just kind of chatting books. So I'm very excited to be recording this video, especially because it is quite late. It's already sort of maybe about the 11th or 12th of March when I'm recording this, so I am running a little bit late with recording this video. I've just been very busy. However, despite the fact that I've been so busy in the month of March, I have actually managed to read quite a few books, so I'm going to share those with you now. The first book is a book that I read digitally, so I don't have a physical copy of it, and it's called Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. Now, this is the second book in a duology. The first one was called Silver in the Wood, and the duology is referred to as the Green Hallow duology. Essentially, we are following, in this book, we're following Henry Silver. In the previous book, we were following Tobias Finch, and Tobias Finch was sort of the Green Man kind of character in that book. And I won't say too much about where we find ourselves at the beginning of this book, but because I don't want to give away what happens in the first one in case you're going to read it. But in this one, we're following Henry, and he is miserable and sulking at the beginning of the book when he receives an invitation from his mother, who is a famous I don't even know what you would call her. She essentially kind of follows the stories to find the creatures behind and kind of calms stuff down. So he receives an invitation from her, and this ends up being an adventure where they are traveling around and trying to kind of sort things out, where the mystical world kind of meets with the real world with mortals. So it was great. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I want to go back now and reread Silver in the Wood followed by this one because I left a bit too long of a gap in between reading the first one and the second one. So I want to make sure that it's all up here. I really enjoyed it. And I would recommend this duology if that sounds like the kind of thing you're into. The second book that I read in the month of March is The Monster of Her Age by Danielle Binks. This is one I have had on my TBR for far too long. Well, having said that, it's not years and years. I discovered it last year, but I've been saying that I want to read it for months and months and months. And I finally got a chance to do that in March. And I'm so glad I did. I also gave this 4 stars. This book follows a girl and we find this out right at the beginning, so this is not a spoiler. Her grandmother is dying. She has suffered from a stroke, and she is no longer verbally communicating with people. So this girl, her name is Ellie. Ellie travels back from Sydney to Tasmania, where her family are from, and she is one of the people who is taking part in kind of always making sure there's somebody from the family beside the grandmother. Now, the context is that her grandmother is actually a well-known horror film star, and we also discover that Ellie has been involved in this world a little bit as well, and that there has been this rift in their relationship. And at the beginning of the book, we don't find out why that rift is there. We just know it exists. And then as the book kind of goes on, the context is revealed a little bit, and we find out a little bit more about what happened between Ellie and her grandmother, and, generally sort of just, how that relationship came to be where it is currently. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but if you are a horror film fan, then this would be a really interesting one for you, because it talks a lot about horror films, and there is a horror film kind of appreciation society that's part of this book that Ellie sort of gets involved with, because she's interested in this girl who is called Ria. And yeah, so they kind of talk about the feminist history of horror film and all of those kind of things, which I found really fascinating. I'm not a really big horror film person myself, but I can imagine that if you were, that this would be a really interesting book to read. But you also don't have to be. It was still just kind of interesting to read all about it. So I loved this. This was great. I think where things fell off a tiny bit was that by the end of the book, the pacing, there were a few pacing issues in terms of things kind of starting to go a little bit too quickly at the end. And I guess that's in part just kind of trying to wrap up the story. But after spending all that time just sort of slowly unpicking what was going on in the story, I kind of wanted more. And I also would have really liked to have had some of the characters from the film club fleshed out a little bit more, so that we could kind of hear more about them. And also Ria's cousin sort of is an integral part of the story, but then is really just touched upon. So I really would have liked a bit more of that. But other than that, this was great, and I really enjoyed it and highly recommend. The next one, just bolting through today. The next book I read is another Australian book, and this one is called Now That I See You by Emma Batchelor. And this was a book that I absolutely adored. It's a debut novel by this author, and I'm really interested to read more from her when she decides to put more out. So basically this follows a couple where initially they're a heterosexual couple with one female presenting person, one male presenting person. But as the book evolves and sort of things kind of go on, the initially male presenting person in the couple comes out, first of all, I guess is a little unsure, but by the end of the book, we're referring to them as a they. So, and is sort of, gender is kind of, I guess, still under exploration by this character. And it sort of chronicles this relationship that these two people have, that is full of love, but it's also really complicated, as you can imagine, with one person kind of very significantly coming into themselves, and then sort of what the implications of that are, not just in terms of the change, but of the before as well, and what that means about their relationship and so on. So yeah, it was just really fascinating to hear it. Now we hear the story from the perspective of the person who is female presenting the whole way through the book, and so that was just a really interesting perspective from the point of view of somebody who is trying to love the person they love in a way that works and is right for both of them, and just finding that hard, and just really, I guess, talking us through what that looks like, or what that can look like, and where that can lead in the end. But anyway, it was beautiful. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I cried. It was such a good book, and I'm so glad that I read it. All right. Some real corkers to start out the month, and then I came to one that really didn't do it for me, which is really unfortunate, because one, the cover is gorgeous, and 2, this came highly recommended. So this is called The Dark Interval by Rainer Maria Rilke. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I apologize if I'm not. Letters for the Grieving Heart. And essentially what this is a collection of letters or segments of letters, relevant segments of letters that the author wrote to various people at times when those people were grieving, and so on. Now, during the month of March, I was grieving, and unfortunately at the beginning of the month, we lost my beautiful grandmother. And I remembered that I had this book, and I thought, oh, perfect. This is the exact right time to read this, because I am 100% grieving, and I'm hoping for balm for the soul. And unfortunately, I didn't get that from this book. I know some other people have found it really helpful, but I just didn't. I thought a lot of the things that were said were quite trite, I'm going to say, or when you thought about them for a little bit long, initially you were like, yeah, that sounds really profound. And then I thought about it a little more, and I'm just like, it doesn't actually mean anything though, or, yeah. It also kind of felt like it was exploring things for the purpose of growth of the grieving person. And to me, in that moment, it felt somewhat disrespectful to the person who had died. And which is not to say that you don't learn from grief. Of course you do. But, in the same way that you learn from all of your life experiences. But I guess in that moment of feeling that grief, I didn't really want to philosophize about it. I just wanted to experience it. And I found this jarring in that way, because I was not at the point of being able to actually take that next step yet. So it was difficult to read. I didn't actually think it was very helpful for somebody who is in the phase of grief. Also, a lot of the letters really only briefly touched on grief. They weren't really focused on grief, and didn't particularly provide a lot of insight into that process, or, I guess if you were the original recipient of this letter and you were in that, and this guy was your friend, sending you the letter, then, or, your partner, whatever the case was, because they're letters that were sent to many different people. I guess that you would appreciate getting that letter from your friend. However, as an outsider kind of who was in the process of grief, reading this in 2022, I guess I didn't get out of it what other people have gotten out of it. So read that as you will. It was not a good one for me. I did end up giving it 3 stars, but I don't know if partly that's just because it's such a pretty book. I am going to unhaul this one because I don't think I'm going to come back to it, which is such a shame because it's just so pretty. Anyway, that's that. Then I also I did get into another book that was a bit more philosophical, and as you can see, I have many tabs sticking out of it, and the book is called Phosphorescence: On Awe, Wonder and Things That Sustain You When the World Goes Dark by Baird. And I very much appreciated this book in many ways. So this book is on loan to me currently, and I'm about to send it back. I will promise I will remove all the tabs before I do. But I just I really did enjoy this. So Baird, I believe, is, I want to say, a journalist. She's a journalist in Australia, and she has written this book as somebody who has experienced cancer, quite aggressive cancer, and cancer that has come back a couple of times, and she's undergone quite a lot of surgeries and medical procedures to remove that cancer. I believe at the moment she is cancer-free, which is great, and I'm very, very happy for her for that. But I guess that kind of is an undercurrent throughout the book, is that is the experience that the author had of cancer, and basically how that put things into perspective for her in terms of things that otherwise might have bothered her, and also the things that she does to kind of inspire awe in her life, and so on. So overall, this book was great. I really enjoyed it. However, it did lose its way a couple of times. First of all, I felt as though, because of the heavy impact that cancer had on the author's life, and her takeaway from that was to kind of not sweat the small stuff, I guess, is, I'm generalizing here, but that's basically one of the takeaways that she had. But in the way that she was talking about that, at times it felt as though she was being a little dismissive of people's anxiety over what she perceived to be small things. Now, I'm sure that for the most part that is probably correct, but then I was also thinking at that time about people who have anxiety disorders or have sort of other related things that sort of have anxiety as kind of as a part of that condition or of that diagnosis, and just how dismissed those people can be by the world in general about the things that they are anxious about, how those things don't make sense to other people. And I just felt that this book tended to be a little dismissive of that experience, and I just feel like that there are things that cause anxiety for people that don't cause anxiety for me, and some things that cause anxiety for me would not be triggers for other people, and so I think it's important not to judge people or to tell them that they're not getting enough out of life by having those anxieties that they really, at this point at least, can't help. So yeah, I just felt it was a little bit dismissive in that way, and also surprisingly, it ended up feeling a little heavy on the Christianity. I wasn't expecting this to be a book about religion, and it's not. And I guess she also does come from a point of view of religion, not sort of being judgmental about other people's religion and so on. However, there was quite a lot of Christian content in here, and it was not expected. It was okay for me, but I just thought that was important for people to know if they were going to pick this up, if that's something that's not going to sit well with them. So yeah, just be aware. Bit heavy on the Christianity. But I otherwise really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed it immensely. I listened to the audiobook and read along, and that was a really good way to experience this book. The audiobook is read by the author as well. So, and I often appreciate audiobooks that are read by the author, because I think that they wrote the book, so they kind of know what they were getting at and the emphasis they wanted to place on certain things. And I felt that was a good way to experience this book. All right, 2 more books to talk about. One is another one that I listened to as an audiobook, and I do not have the physical copy of, and that is Creatures of Passage by Morowa Yejidé. And I gave this 5 stars. It was chef's kiss. Fantastic. I guess I went into it not knowing what to expect, other than what I'd heard about the book very briefly, which was essentially that it's about a haunted taxi, and that really was enough of a draw card for me to go, I need to read this book. This sounds really fascinating. And I felt like, and this is going to sound really strange, that one of the things I liked the most about this book was its rhythm and the kind of, it sort of has this misty swirling quality to it, which, there are misty swirling parts about the book, and that really comes through in the writing. So just in terms of like atmosphere and rhythm, pacing of the book, and the sort of cyclical nature of some of the things that they talk about, they circle, but the author circles back to concepts to do with I guess like destiny and things kind of working out the way that they're supposed to, as per the universe and so on. And so, yeah, that kind of rhythm and swirliness really came through in the writing, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. I also really love the way that the author very slowly kind of fleshed out the characters, you know, so you kind of got enough to kind of hook you in, but then you definitely kind of had to draw back to what you'd heard about that character before to kind of, you know, continue with their story, because as I said, it's kind of this cyclical kind of feeling. So you're kind of circling back, like you get information that you have no context for, but then you get the context and you circle back and you're like, oh, right, that's what that was about. Or now that thing makes sense that they were talking about before that didn't make sense to me at the beginning. I really, really want to reread this, and probably like a physical copy of the book, reread it, because I want to be able to kind of sit with bits of it. And also, now that I know the full context of what happens in the story, that I kind of want to go back and kind of find the things that I missed the first time around. Recurring motifs, just expertly executed. It was really, really good. And this is one of the books that has been nominated for the Women's Prize this year. And I have not read the other books, but this was the first one from the long list. I really hope that it gets to shortlist, because I think it is a fantastic book. You know, very, very expertly written, and I can't wait to read more from this author. It was so, so good. The last book that I read this month, in the month of March, was Our Lady of the Nile by Scholastique Mukasonga. I read this as part of my Reading Around the World book club that I'm part of. This was our pick for Rwanda. And so we vote on, we all nominate books after doing a bit of research, and we vote on the one that we want to read. This one, I think, won by quite a margin, and we were all quite interested to read it. I ended up, I gave it 3.5 stars. I think a lot of it I found a little bit difficult to follow, just because of it kind of shifted narrators and shifted kind of focus quite a lot. When we were talking about it in our book club meeting afterwards, a lot of other people weren't bothered by that, because they had sort of read it, and I believe this was the intention of the author, as each of these girls in this kind of exclusive Catholic school. Sorry, I should probably give you a bit of context. Let me finish my thought and then I'll come back and give you the context. So that each of the girls sort of represented a group of people in Rwandan society. So they were supposed to be sort of like a, I guess, a symbol of a particular group. So whether it was a political group or a social group or, you know, the military or, you know, that sort of thing. So now let me go back and give you a bit more context. So this book is set at the source of the Nile River, and it is set in a Catholic girls' school, and it occurs prior to the Rwandan genocide. So at this point, tension is simmering beneath the surface between the two main groups in Rwanda. At this point, there are Tutsi students that are attending this school, but they're kind of part of a minority, and there's like a quota. So it's sort of like the government are saying, look, we're putting these people in, you know, we're treating everybody fairly. But the reality on the ground is that these girls are not treated the same way as the other girls. And their lives turn out to be in danger. So it certainly, you know, I appreciated that this book was about the, you know, upcoming genocide without it being exactly about the genocide. So we sort of like get to know the kinds of things that were going on and were simmering under the surface in society at the time, in the lead up to the genocide. And to kind of get to know what was happening politically, what the reality was, you know, behind what was being said, and behind what the world saw from the outside. And also one of the, I thought, strengths of this book was that it kind of showed the ongoing negative impacts of colonialism on groups of people, you know, who are favored or who are supported in some way by the colonial powers that be. In this case, it's Belgium, and there was quite a lot of Belgian involvement in Rwanda. And I really liked the way that criticism was written by the author. I think she did a great job of explaining that, and also showing some of the like surprising ways in which it infiltrated their society and made things difficult, and also set up some of the horrible things that occurred in that country. So I guess I had some mixed feelings about this. Some of the storylines were genuinely bizarre, and I couldn't kind of suspend my disbelief in certain places that these kind of things were going on. But I guess if you're looking at it from the prism of, or through the lens of, you know, that these are representations of society and the ways that certain people thought, then it kind of makes it make a bit more sense, I guess. But I still personally didn't get on with this as much as I had hoped that I would. Also, my edition of the book had a couple of pages mixed up, printed in the wrong order, which is really weird. So thankfully it was only a couple, but still, as I'm reading, I'm like, that sentence doesn't flow on. And then I realized that the page numbers were in the wrong order. So I had to then backtrack, reread that section. And it was like at a really peak action section as well, where, you know, some stuff was going on, and it really kind of ruined that moment for me, I guess, or that like the building up of the suspense. So it made it a little bit hard to follow. Anyway, I am glad that I read this book. I learned a lot from reading it, as well as from reading other things that I was kind of, I guess, sort of very briefly researching. I don't want to give you the wrong idea when I say researching, like I wasn't hitting the books, but I was sort of looking things up that were of interest to me, or that I didn't know as much about. And so I learned quite a lot from reading this book, and I'm very glad that I read it, even though I didn't always get along with it. All right, so that is the month of March. I've got, what have I got? 5 physical books and 2 digital or audio books. So yeah, I had a pretty good month, despite the fact that I was super, super busy. I actually got through quite a lot of books by the end of the month, which I was really pleased about. And I'm making excellent progress in the month of April, you'll be pleased to know. And I can't wait to tell you all about that very, very soon. See you on the next one. Bye.